Everybody, welcome back to Yumble TV. I'm Yumble, and today I'd like to talk to you about a few mods that I use to change the way that I play City Skylines. So City Skylines, at its most basic, is a really good traffic simulator and a really good city builder in a lot of ways, but I've found that it's lacking in realism in terms of population, realism in terms of how much traffic is generated. It lacks a little realism in terms of transit, and there's actually a few mods that we can use that fundamentally change the game and will also probably change the way you build and the decisions that you make, and ultimately your city will look more lifelike, it'll have a more realistic population number-wise, it'll have more realistic traffic and transit, and probably even a more realistic skyline once we're done talking about it. Let me go into these three mods specifically, and we'll go over what they do for you. The first mod that I want to talk about is a bit hard to understand. I didn't get it at first. It took me a little bit of time to see the value in it, but it's called RICO Revisited. Now, RICO is your demand curve. It's residential, industrial, commercial offices, which is the demand curve down here, the green, blue, orange. The game comes with a bunch of unique buildings, and there are also a bunch of downloadable unique buildings from the Steam Workshop. But let's use this standard. The hypermarket may have come from a DLC, but it's built into my game. And I'm just going to place it. So this is a unique building, which means that it essentially functions as a park, right? So this is an expansive retail facility. Retail facility to me screams commercial. That says, hey, this is a commercial building. I want commercial employees and commercial shoppers. But the game reads this building as essentially a park because it is a unique building. What if I wanted this to satisfy that little commercial blip that we have there? We need a little commercial in this city, right? So I'm going to use what's called Ploppable RICO, or excuse me, RICO Revisited. There's a few different RICO mods, but RICO Revisited appears right here, the RICO settings. So I'm going to pause the game while we do this. This is the hypermarket. This is the building. What I want to do is add local. So a local setting means that we are adding a RICO setting on my machine, my computer, my copy of Skylines only. You can download buildings that have predetermined author settings here. You can see the buildings these are all different type of buildings alphabetically that I have that are converted already or to be converted. But what I'd like to do is add a local setting, because this one is not a RICO building by default, so it'll check that right box there. I want this to be a commercial building. I'd like it to be, we'll say RICO high density, because it is kind of a shopping center. Commercial high. It gives you all these options here. You can convert it to leisure, tourism, whatever kind of thing you can think of. We can do a whatever we want, really. But commercial high is most appropriate here. I'm going to go level 2. I don't really know if the level actually adjusts anything or what have you, but we're going to go with that. And this works in conjunction with another mod that we're going to go over in just a minute. But the final thing, experimental. Don't let that scare you off. This has never failed for me, but I'd like to save and apply changes. Boom. So now this has changed to level 2. Let's see what that has done to this building. Let's see what that has actually changed it to. So now this building is a high-density commercial building. That's what that blue means there. It's going to employ 303 employees. It is going to... what else? It's going to require deliveries. It's going to have people shopping there. The parking lot is going to fill up because of the nature of that. So now instead of being a park, it's a shopping center, which is actually what it is. Think about that, right? That's what a trip. So unique buildings by default are parks, and RICO Revisited lets you adjust and turn that park into an actual functional building that requires things. That's what that symbol means. It requires goods right now. So that's going to start getting deliveries from our highway system. This is a new map that I'm building on Twitch. That's why it's so sparse right now. But yeah, so that is waiting for deliveries. Things will get pathed. Now, what if, just a same question, what if I have another building here, which I do, you know I'm prepared. Leotop Plaza. I downloaded this at some point, and it'll go, I haven't decided where it'll go. Maybe it goes here. Maybe it goes somewhere in this area. That's fine. Leotop Plaza, let's read the description and see what it is. No description. This could literally be whatever we want. What do we want from this? Maybe we want people living here. Maybe we want it to be offices. I think people living here would be more appropriate, as I see the residential demand going up incrementally. So I'd like to take this building, Currently, it's a unique building, so it's just a park. It's just essentially a really tall park. And I'd like to build our skyline up using this asset, and I want to convert it to residential using RICO. So we're going to add a local setting, residential, high density residential, residential high. Yep, it's all that stuff. This is a level 3. Sure, I don't know. I don't actually know if the level matters. It could be a level 4 or level 5, but whatever. We're going to do that, and we are going to save and apply changes. This is modified using another using another mod that we're going to go over in just a second, which it detects, called realistic population. But we're going to save and apply changes. Now look at that. It says 325 households live here. That sounds like not enough, probably, but we can adjust that later using our realistic population menu if we have to. So yeah, instead of this being a big park, now it actually holds people. Now people can actually move in and live here, and it actually fills out the skyline. Whereas zoned buildings, this is what's called plopping. We've plopped these buildings. These are all custom, hand-designated, hand-plopped buildings, as opposed to zoning, which is where you do, oh, I want to do residential here, and it just builds up whatever it wants to. This is if you want to, let's say, have a building that has a bigger footprint. So this looks like a 5x5 when it comes to squares. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe it's 7x7 actually. 7x7 footprint, and much taller than any sort of zoned building. If we go over here, you'll see there are all kinds of zoned in suburban buildings, and then these are the I forget what it's called, the eco-friendly buildings. What is this? Self-sufficient, that's what it is. Self-sufficient buildings. They only get so high, you know. This is a lower, like literally a shorter area. So it's only going to get as tall as, say, this building here. That's about as tall as it gets. But if you look at the buildings that I've plopped, much taller. Much, much taller. So you can really fill out your skyline using this mod and actually have tall buildings. I get asked that on stream a lot. How is your city so tall? Where'd you get the tall buildings? Those are unique buildings that we converted using Ploppable RICO. And just to finish out the idea here, there's a tab down here. You can see in the bottom right corner, Ploppable RICO. Once you've converted things, they show up in under these tabs, where now all of a sudden many of them will be empty because I haven't done them all. But now all of them show up here. So once I've converted it and saved a local setting of it, Leotop Plaza right there, here's another copy of it. I'm not actually going to build another copy of it, but yeah, it's been converted. So now every time I place it in the future, we have a local setting that says, hey, this is a commercial building. And hey, this is a residential building, all that kind of stuff. So those are preserved there forever. One more thing to talk about. Let's say you have the Move It mod, which is not essential for this situation, but let's say that you want to build kind of a cool, let's call it like a corner building. I have these great assets that using Ploppable RICO, I've converted them, and now we can literally go in and I can say, okay, I have this 60-degree residential building, and I've made a 60-degree corner there. Awesome. So there's an example of a 60-degree building that is residential. You'll notice it's floating because in real life, in the real world, many cities have lower levels that are commercial. This is called, I would call this a mixed-use building, and that's in fact, that's what the asset creator calls it as well. It is a mixed-use building. And this is its companion. So the upper level without a bottom is residential because that's where people live. This is the commercial zone. So we've got commercial on the ground floor. We've got, it happens to be a Subway, Starbucks. The Yumble TV is not affiliated with any of these entities. But yeah, you can do that. The corner is just a cool bonus. Like I can just take these buildings and snug them up with that 60-degree corner for realism. There we go. Using Move It and snapping. And now we've got this cool 60-degree corner with a realistic kind of mixed-use spread where it's got a bit of high-density commercial at the bottom and then a bunch of residential, say, condos up top. And that happened because of Ploppable RICO, because of the RICO settings. Sorry, I keep saying that word. It's not Ploppable RICO anymore. It's RICO Revisited. So please get RICO Revisited. It'll help you fill out your skyline. Let's go over a couple more mods that help influence this. The second mod that I want to discuss with you is the one that I was implying just now, realistic population. So the way that City Skylines works by default is a bit disproportionate. I would call it kind of arcade-ish, arcade mode, meaning that it balances the game in such a way that it makes things that should be easy a little bit more difficult, and some things that are difficult a little bit easier. What realistic population does is it takes into account the size of a given building and says how many people should occupy that building, or how many jobs should it have, or how many people should shop there. So I have realistic population turned on. This is an asset that I've converted using Ploppable RICO, just like we talked about in that last segment, right? There's this realistic population button, which the menu, it doesn't really matter unless you want to change the settings, but using the actual dimensions of this asset, using the height and the number of floors and how far apart the floors are and things like that, it calculates the area of the building, scaffolding. It takes all these things into account, and it cranks out a number of jobs. So you can see that this building, which used to be a unique building that is now converted into a RICO building, an office building is what I used it for, you'll see that this has 2,368 workers. So holy cow, compared to the base game where the biggest buildings usually have like, I don't even remember anymore. I've been using these settings for so long. In the base game, it's nowhere near 2,000. Like what, maybe 100 workers? Please put in the comments, please remind me in vanilla Skylines how the biggest buildings, like a zoned office building, if I were to zone office space here, it would only open a certain amount of buildings. We can let that grow if we want to see what happens. But yeah, so the same thing over here. This building that's been converted to residential is using Ploppable RICO, which we just spoke about, and that's fine. In conjunction with realistic population, this says, hey, there's 870 homes here. That's not 870 people, that's 870 households. So maybe it's 870 times 3, 2 adults and a kid, that kind of thing, times 4 at times. So you can see the spread here. It's 1,300 plus another 300 plus 500. So many hundreds of people occupying this one building, which makes the population more realistic, right? It makes this area, this office building with all these units, you can count the number of windows and number of offices and units, and you don't have to, but if you imagine a building like that in real life, you might assume it has thousands of people working in it. Whereas this building here, oh, okay, well, realistic population is still turned on. This is still not vanilla. The beauty of it, that's a good segue actually. The beauty of it is that it still works on zoned buildings. So any buildings that you zone in using the typical zoning tools here, right? I used an office zoning to produce this building. That produced 141 workers, which is probably more realistic than whatever low value. Somebody in my chat once said that I think the highest that it'll go is like 32 people in these offices, even the tall ones. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say that it should be maybe 100 people. But these buildings are still under the rule of realistic population, so they're getting calculated, though they are only level 2 at this point, level 3. But then a taller building, so these have like 40 people in them. This one has 141 somehow. I'm fine with that. This building has 870 households, thousands of employees, which makes sense to me. This hotel has 203 employees. Plausible based on the size of it, right? That's a pretty big building. This is a commercial building that holds 896 workers. I don't think that counts people shopping at it, right? There should be constant flow of people in and out based on who needs to shop there and whatnot. This is still having trouble at filling its workers, but that's okay. We'll build more houses eventually too. But yeah, using those two mods in conjunction with one another gets really, in my opinion, really great results. And if you ever don't like the results, if I ever wanted to reduce that number, I don't think I'm actually going to do it right now, but if I wanted to say 2,000 employees, that's ridiculous. I want only 1,000 employees. I could fill in that field and click Add Custom Settings, and that would magically change that number when I reset the panel. I didn't actually do it, but you could change that to 1,000 workers, and boom, that's really it. So with that, you get a more realistic feeling in the city. Those tall buildings are occupied. The tall buildings have people working in them, and they have energy, and they're getting pathed. People want to go there not just to visit it as a big park. They want to go there to work and live and shop, etc. And with that comes more traffic demand, right? That segues into the third mod pretty nicely. We'll get to that in a second. But now all of a sudden, this place has 2,000 people working here. They need to get there. There's many more people living in the city all of a sudden because of your big, tall, beautiful skyline that you're constructing with these mods. They need a way to get there. I'm going to talk about how getting there and getting home with that many people can be influenced using Traffic Manager. So here we have an example of a shopping center and transit hub. So the shopping center has some usual suspects here in the US. Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, Best Buy, you know, whatever. People shop there. That's great. I've also chosen to include parking, you'll notice. And cars are actually using the parking. That's something else. And then we've got this transit area here with kind of a transit hub. It's sort of a tram, bus, train, metro, all in one transit hub. It's not detailed or anything, but it works. It's all going. And you might be wondering, why did he do that much parking? It's not necessary in City Skylines because people will disappear their cars into what has been dubbed pocket cars. It's when somebody drives up to a building. Watch in your city before you make the changes that I recommend. You'll notice people drive up to the front door, their car disappears, a person spawns in its place, and they walk into the building, right? That's not how it works in the real world, and that's certainly not how it works when your 100-employee building, your 106-employee, your 200-employee building. That's just not real. So in steps Traffic Manager President Edition. Most people know this mod. This is like a very popular, quite common mod to have, and I do recommend it for a lot of reasons. You can add yield signs, you can turn off traffic lights, you can add timed traffic lights, or do lane connector designations, or lane arrows, disable parking. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with Traffic Manager. But what I want to talk about is the much less discussed, possibly, the more... not underground, but this wasn't immediately obvious to me. So if you go to the Traffic Manager settings, right now I'm just in the normal options menu of the game. As you add mods, they all populate right here. I've got a bunch active right now. Don't worry about it. Traffic Manager is the one we want. What I'd like to do is show you some settings within Traffic Manager that can really help give you some knowledge about your city. Little knowledge, we like that. So you can affect the simulation accuracy, which is fine. This is the traffic simulation, which is the main thing of the game. You can do advanced vehicle AI for lane changing. You can disable despawning, which is really, really cool. If you've noticed that when cars get stuck in traffic, they start to disappear over time. This button is kind of a hard mode, if you know what I mean. In fact, all of the settings I'm giving you right now are kind of a City Skylines hard mode for those of you who have beaten the vanilla game so many times and they want more of a challenge and more of a realistic city. Cars don't despawn in real life. So we will stop them from despawning so that fire truck that was stuck in traffic doesn't disappear and try again only to get stuck. We'll disable that. That also means that your traffic jam isn't going to go away. You're going to have to address it legitimately using legitimate road hierarchy and other means, Traffic Manager, that kind of thing. Within this same gameplay menu, that's not even what I'm here to talk about. I'm just passionate about it. What I'm here to talk about is more realistic parking. This changes everything. Sorry it took so long to get to the point, but here it is. More realistic parking. We've used RICO Revisited, so our buildings are host to hundreds, if not thousands, of extra people. We've disabled despawning so that they can't disappear when they're in traffic. Now, with more realistic parking, they can't use pocket cars. You have to address, as a city planner and as a mayor or whatever role you want to take on in this game, you have to address that they have to put their car somewhere. So this actually gives you an extra menu. It's kind of a hidden menu. I had to read the wiki to understand this. But ready? We'll unpause the game. I'm going to hit the traffic button. And this is normal, except the buildings have color now. If I change that setting... In fact, I'll do it. Don't tempt me, I'll do it. If we disable more realistic parking, now all of a sudden, the buildings are just white and we only see the roads. This is the default status of things. Realistic parking is not turned on, so we just see the roads. We just see the spots where traffic is a bit heavier. We see the spots, an entrance to a parking lot or whatever. Or maybe the spot of a traffic jam. Fortunately, there's no traffic jams here yet. But if we readjust that setting and put it back to the way I had it, it'll actually show how much parking your buildings need. So ready? As I said, the buildings turn red as they need extra parking. So for example, this is kind of orange looking. We may need more parking in this area for that reason. Our sports stadium, our track arena over here apparently doesn't have enough parking. It's kind of orange. This building, with the giant parking garage next to it and empty parking lot, it's a bit quirky. Don't quote me on, the perfection of it. But this building may require more parking now that we've added a commercial center right next to it, So with that, you start to think, okay, I can solve that problem by adding more parking lots and things. Or, better yet, another secret menu. This little demand curve here, when you click the transport button, there's a demand button here. And the buildings with extra demand do the same thing. They turn red. The city is perfect. This is a transit this is a transit miracle, in fact, because there's metro and there's monorail and there's trams and there's internal, or external connections and a metro. The metro runs all the way across. So all of these buildings are optimized as far as their transit potential right now. Maybe that's slightly orange. And that's the outgoing demand. If you switch view, the incoming demand shows the buildings that have incoming transit needs. So apparently this building has an incoming transit need. So maybe we'll add a bus over here or something like that. But yeah, if you turn on realistic parking in the traffic manager settings, it gives you all these extra things that you have to address. So we've disabled the despawning. The cars don't disappear. We have to give them a parking lot. So like this area here, boom, the parking garage doesn't have enough parking. Everything's maxed out here. We need more parking or less buildings. I'm not going to do less buildings. This area is coming along great. So eventually, maybe this gets swapped out for a better parking garage, parking lot combo. Maybe we'll fix that in the future. This area is clearly going to need some help, and that's great. And you can fix that by using transit, and you can measure how well your transit's doing with how green or how red the buildings are using the outgoing demand and the incoming demand. So using all of these little tricks, we've essentially just made the game a bit more realistic, a bit more challenging, and it forces you to make some decisions that you might not otherwise make, like a parking garage or a parking lot, where before those are kind of an eyesore. I don't like to overdo them, but for a city with this much traffic, for a city with this many vehicles and frankly this much population, those become kind of necessary elements where you have to address the 2,000 people working in that office building and give them a parking garage, or you have to add a monorail to get uptown. You have to add some sort of system, some sort of transit system to help address these problems that you've now introduced. And all of these things together changes how the game looks, it changes how the game works, changes the nature of your skyline. You may want to get some taller buildings in there. You may want to limit areas that you would put a bunch of unique buildings in, and maybe spread out the tall buildings depending on what the demand is calling for or how much traffic those buildings are generating. So yeah, those are my tips about those 3 mods. That's a realistic population, traffic manager, and RICO Revisited. I'm going to link those in the description. Guys, thanks for listening to everything I have to say about this. It's taken me a long time to kind of decide how to play the game, and that's ever evolving, but right now these are the settings that I'm using to change the way that my cities function and to change how things look and to ultimately build a better skyline. My name is Yumble. I stream on Twitch a couple days a week. I really can't thank you enough for subscribing here. Feel free to like the video. Feel free to check out the other videos. Whatever you can do to help, I really appreciate it. And I really love making content for Skylines, so any support you give is super appreciated. I will absolutely see you in the next stream or the next video. Thank you for watching.